My name is Oscar Crabb. I am a textile artist who works with recycled materials and natural dyes to create fabric, wall hangings and collages, which try to bring some of the joy of nature into pieces of artwork by using natural materials themselves. Today we're going to do a quick workshop with some spices that release colour and some black ink that's made also from natural materials, which I've got here. We're going to make something a little bit like this sunset scene with a tree and some birds, some clouds and some stars as well. So I've got here with me some turmeric, which everyone is probably familiar with. Bright yellow will stain your fingers as well. I've also got some annatto, which I've quickly soaked with some warm water just to bring out the colour. So if you have your warm water with you, pour it over this now, get things started. Annatto is a spice which is in a lot of South American and Mexican food. It's got a slightly peppery flavour and a nice bright red waxy coating. I've also got some black ink which is made the traditional way. This is quite a specialist one. You might just have normal black ink. It really doesn't matter if you do. This one is made using oak extract and iron, which reacts to create a chemical compound, which when it reacts with the air creates a black ink. And you'll see that happening on camera later. The black ink will start kind of grey and will slowly become darker and more black. I've also got some water and a paintbrush and some PVA glue and some watercolour paper, and we're ready to go. So if the annatto's already got warm water on it, we can start to wet the paper and just soak it with as much water as you like. Use your biggest paintbrush. I only have one, so I'm using this one. But if you've got a nice wide paintbrush, it's going to be your friend here. And just cover the whole thing. Don't worry about getting it too wet. It will soak up a lot of that water anyway. Okay, so I've got my wet paper and I'm going to grab some turmeric with my hands and just sprinkle it on the paper. Get a bit more water on there. Sprinkle it on mostly on the bottom half and just sprinkle it on. The reason we're doing it on the bottom is because we want to create a gradient with a dark yellow at the bottom and a light yellow at the top. And we're going to use the turmeric on the paper to create a paint directly onto the paper. Put a bit at the top as well, but not as much. Okay, that seems like enough. Like I said, turmeric will stain your hands. That's okay. We're going to get messy with this workshop anyway. So that looks nice, and it'll probably smell nice as well. And the next thing we're going to do is just set this aside, take another sheet of watercolour paper and tear it into some strips. So I've already started tearing mine up. I've gone for some thick ones and some thin ones. And we're going to use this to make our tree, so we'll tear a few more. Don't worry about making it accurate or consistent, we want the irregularity. Tear a few like that, but make sure you leave some paper left because you're going to need it for a little bit more later on. So anything like that's fine. Don't worry if you get some yellow on it because we're going to paint this black. So with the strips that you decided to use, it's best to go for one thick one. That's going to be your tree trunk, and a selection of smaller, thinner ones. I'm going to go for these 4. set these out in front of you. This is going to get messy, so if you want to put a bit of paper down or a cloth, go ahead and do that now. I'm taking my black ink and now I can show you a little bit about this ink and tell you a little bit about it. So this is how black ink used to be made for hundreds and hundreds of years. They would boil up material from an oak tree and they would mix it with hot water and iron, which would create a chemical compound called ferrous tannate. And when that reacts with the air, it continues to darken and become a nice deep black. So at the moment it just looks grey and it looks like quite a thin ink, but it will darken up to become this sort of colour. I'll just show you now for a contrast. This is dry, this is wet. And as it dries, it will react with the air and it will oxidize. So I'm going to keep painting these. So with the rest of your ripped up paper, choose a few more which you could use as some clouds. So I might go for these three. And you want to choose some which are curved on the bottom and have the rough edge on the bottom. And the reason for this is because that rough edge is going to go darker. So you can see here where you've got that dark bit there. Looks like it's catching the sun from underneath and it's lighter on top. So we're going to go for these three. And this is where you're going to use the water that you poured onto your annatto at the beginning. So just get your brush wet with that. And it's not going to be the brightest colour, it's going to be a little more subtle than the other colours that we've got on this. It's kind of going to be a browny, pinky, orange kind of colour. So now that things have kind of dried, I'm going to bring the yellow thing back, the yellow sheet of paper back here, and bring in your black pieces. You can see how much darker these are looking already. They will continue to get darker as they dry. So your black ink will probably be black straight away. This one takes a little longer, but it's cool to see it happening. I'm going to just take a scrap of paper and put some PVA glue on there. And this is where we can start arranging the collage. So take your big piece and just roughly paint it with some PVA glue. Don't worry about getting it right up to the edges because it will be quite nice to have some bits which are not completely stuck down. And I'm going to stick that in the middle and just poke it down with my brush. Mine is still wet, so it's kind of bleeding onto the yellow bit a little bit. You can leave yours fully dry if you like. And I'm going to do the same with these branches. So we kind of have a little tree in the middle now, and we can put the clouds around it. So try not to get them covered in black ink. Don't worry if you do. I probably will. Again, just paint it roughly with the glue and place the clouds wherever you want. If you see any bits sticking up that you don't like, just glue them down. go. So I've got my clouds on there. The last thing we can do, if you like, is to just tear a few little squares or diamonds, and we can use these to create some stars. I'm going to go for 4, something like that little shape there, or that one there. Rinse out my brush here. And with a little bit of glue, just pop these. So there's our background, and the last thing we can put on is some birds and some branches. So finally, take your black ink again, and I'm going to do a few little birds, just like you used to draw them when you were a kid. And we're all done. There is our sunset scene, made entirely with colour from plants.